Hey everybody, welcome to FYPod. This is a new show where we try to figure out what is going on in Gen Z politics and culture by actually conversing with people from Gen Z, like via voice, as opposed to text message or Snap or whatever, DM. And I'm excited to have a new partner in this journey. He's one of America's most prominent Gen Zs. It's Cam Kasky. How you doing, brother?
Hey, man. My name is Cameron. I'm 24 years old. I'm a former child star school shooting survivor, which is sort of like if you were it's sort of like you're a kid with a Disney show, except the Disney show is about your friends getting murdered in a school and it's real and it's CNN. And just like any of those kids, I have a ton of trauma from the experience. But now I'm having a great time, and it's great to be here with you.
We love to start shows with trauma. This was kind of what I was going to ask you at the start of this. So as we're kind of introducing people who don't know you, like, who are Bulwark types. It must kind of suck to, when you introduce yourself, have to talk about the worst day of your life. And I'm kind of wondering how you navigate that.
It's interesting. I was touring an apartment recently, and I was meeting two people who were sort of loose mutual friends, and they were the individuals who lived there. And the meeting was going so well. They showed me around. We were talking about lifestyle. I don't really like to stay out late. I don't have people over so often. And then right when I was about to leave, "Oh, where are you from?" So naturally, I always say, "Oh, Broward County, Florida," the part where all the other Jews from New York went. And then they say, "Oh, where'd you go to high school?" For some reason, people always ask. And I'm like, yeah, so remember the most recent giant traumatizing shooting that happened in the United States? Yeah. But also I played Muttle in our production of Fiddler on the Roof.
Really? How was the Parkland Fiddler on the Roof performance?
It's actually, I was talking to Wolf Blitzer maybe 2 days after the shooting, and he was talking, he said to me, how do you feel about this conspiracy theory that you and your classmates are crisis actors, paid actors who were hired by George Soros to pretend you were at this shooting? And I said, Wolf, if you had seen me in our school's production of Fiddler on the Roof, you'd know that nobody would pay me to act for anything. And he laughed a little bit. I got Wolf I nudged him. You can't get Wolf to split his shit, but I got a little bit of something out of him.
He did chuckle. We can find this is a serviceable video. I've watched this video. And Wolf breaks character a little bit. It's a little jarring, I guess, to make that joke 2 days after the shooting, though. But I guess that probably does say something about the way that you were processing it and how you handle the stuff.
I think personality was sort of a double-edged sword during our advocacy because, we started the March for Our Lives organization together, and it became about a small few of us. There were a couple of us who a lot of the press and attention was sort of circling, and it was a mixture of, are we sitting here and making this terrible, traumatic experience about us? There are 3,000 kids at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. Why am I putting me into this narrative? But then we looked at the people who connected with us, so many of whom were moms. Such a huge and crucial part of gun violence prevention advocacy is groups like Moms Demand Action. And it is, middle-aged mothers who do so much of the most important work. And so many of them who might have otherwise not engaged with the issue looked at us and said, well, that could have been my kid. And those bits of personality that we would inject into different conversations we were having with the public, in my opinion, it did two things. It sort of made this tragedy about us, but it also gave people something to connect with. Because I think one of the things that made Sandy Hook almost impersonal for certain people was the fact that these kids who got massacred, they were babies. And they couldn't come out and speak for themselves. So the parents spoke and did so much great advocacy. The community spoke out, but the children who were there were still collecting Thomas the Trains, whereas we were just old enough to have a sense of what was going on. I mean, while I was hiding from this mass shooter in my high school, one of the first thoughts I had was like, of course the fucking NRA is going to love this. So, you know, we went out there and we were these personalities for people. But I think part of what was necessary and part of why we were able to cultivate the energy we got was because people could connect with us.
Yeah, I like that you immediately have your activism hat on and like what was the strategy there, and that's important because it's stuff we're going to talk about on the show. But it also is like was a little bit of coping, I assume.
Well, you know, it's important to hold space for the fact that activism is something that is programmed into my brain because during my formative years,
are we genuinely holding space for this or sarcastically holding space for this? I'm sorry.
I would say a little bit of both. Okay. Because where I was going with this is, you know, activism is a second language for me. It's the type of words that you say when you're speaking to different communities or talking to the news. Those are sort of built into my head in a traumatic and also occasionally quite useful way. But I'm fundamentally like some dude, and I sort of prioritize having fun and making friends and hanging out with people and doing random stuff. Like, you know, I still do press conferences with Chuck Schumer where I talk about nonpartisan school safety boards, and I still meet with gun violence prevention organizers. But also, like, you know, I like to hang out with the rapper from Detroit who lived on my couch rent-free for 6 months and play basketball with the boys. Like, that is who I am. I mean, I work in the fucking theater. Like, I hang out with actors and musicians and artists.
In the theater, or like, what are you doing? Like, you're doing.
I am the manager of new program development at a Fancy Nancy Theater in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in Harvard Square. It's a job where I was talking to my CEO, and he said, your job is to bring great pieces of art, whether that's comedy shows, plays, musicals, concerts. Your job is to bring that stuff to our theater by networking around New York City and bringing the most creative stuff from New York to our theater. And you pick your job title. You report directly to me, the CEO. You pick your job title. So I called a Broadway producer that I'd worked with before and said, what's a job title that sounds legit enough that people will take the meeting with me because they'll know I have this really cool job at this theater, but it doesn't sound too legit that they hear about it and go, why did they give this dumb fucking kid this job? So if I called myself director of programming, which I do a lot of the things a director of programming does, they would say, this place is clearly not a legitimate place if they're having this kid who looks like he's playing a 16-year-old on a CW show, this position. But again, I need a little bit of ethos. So I am the manager of new program development. So, and therefore, like, I am emotionally able to do shit like the press conferences with Chuck Schumer because being a school shooting survivor is not baked into my identity. And I got to tell you, Tim, one of the best things I experience with people is when there's someone I know in my social circles, of which I have very many, unlike many young men in the Democratic Party. When I'm hanging out with my cool friends that actually have lives, there will be people I've met at 4 or 5 parties, functions, events, whatever. And they'll be like, where are you from again? And it's like this spiritual freedom I get from realizing that I've been able to build a connection with somebody who has an understanding of who I am and what I'm all about and doesn't know about the school shooting. And that is one of my favorite experiences, is to make friends that don't know I hid from a gunman, and let them come to like me for me and not for how brave and inspiring I was only 2 years after losing my virginity.
Oh, congrats. That was pretty early.
Hell yeah, man. Thank you. Yeah. I appreciate that.
Way to go. They're saying Gen Z's not fucking anymore. It's apparently not true on this pod. So we're going to have a lot more time over the course of the shows, I hope, unless we get canceled. I don't know who would cancel us, though, because I'm kind of in charge. But to talk about school shooting stuff and to explore all of the other layers of Cam, but and our guests. But so I do want you to kind of just lay the groundwork for people on like what your political kind of identity is and how you see the political world right now?
Sure. I would say that I don't have the most traditional political identity just because a lot of the friends of mine who I spend my time with, a lot of them fall very far to the left of me, and think that I'm some sort of, establishment shill. And, I
like
respect them. And then there's friends of mine.
The establishment shills or the people that are far left of you?
I respect people I respect. I try not to look at it like that. And then I have friends of mine who I see as establishment liberal shills who think that I'm this left-wing nutcase. And I'm like, I can't make anybody happy. So what I'm going to do is say what I believe, know that I am being true to myself, and not speak on things that I haven't read at least 5 different articles about. And that is my political identity.
5.
So I think that the idea that any individual politician can represent your values is a slippery slope. And it's a very silly thing, the way that some people idolize politicians, the way that, friends of mine to the left of me in many ways saw Bernie Sanders as the end-all be-all, and the way that friends of mine in the sort of center thought that Joe Biden was this kind of... They almost infantilized him and looked at him as this cute, sweet old man. And I'm like, this is somebody who's been doing politics for over half a century. Like, relax. So I think that, like, ascribing to any sort of...
You didn't post any Dark Brandon memes?
I did for the week that it was funny. Because before Biden got in on the Dark Brandon thing, it was funny. And then Biden... It's like when the teacher gets in on a joke that the class is making, and then it's like, well, now it's not funny. The teacher likes it.
Yeah. So I'm totally with you, and it's good advice to not idolize politicians because they'll all let you down pretty much. But like, who do you like? Are there some politics out there that you like? I mean, are you kind of a big Mike Pence man, or anybody else tickle your pickle?
Oh my God, I forgot about Mike Pence. I wonder what he's up to these days. It must be a very interesting thing to be Mike Pence, getting usurped by the biggest fucking dweeb on the planet, J.D. Vance, right after your supporters tried to hang you. That suck. And then he ran for president. That Republican primary in 2023 was that 2020? Yeah, it was 2023. That was such an interesting experience. Who do I like? I don't know. There are politicians who I don't even necessarily align with on a lot of things, who I like just because it seems like they're sincere people and they're doing what they think is best. And I think a problem we have in the Democratic Party is rewarding the people who reinforce that the Democratic Party ought to keep doing what they're doing instead of making change. But, if I were to magically place somebody into office right now, this isn't based on electability, but if there's one politician I could just sort of pluck out and put into the White House, I'd probably pick Elizabeth Warren. I have certain policies.
I was hoping you were going to say Beto, because we do both love Beto.
I do love Beto. Beto would be great too. I do think Beto would do a great job, and I think that he would be great in so many ways. I think my first instinct with Warren is sort of this performative woke identity politics of I would sure love a woman to be president, but also I think that Warren is someone who could get a lot of great things done. But yeah, Beto is great.
She got a little wrapped up in that. I mean, you make the joke about performative wokeness, but her campaign did kind of get wrapped up in that. I feel like she would have been better off if she would have stuck with her original kind of, economic populism, CFPB, go after the bankers vibe. And she got a little, I felt like her team was very...
You know who I would love to be president? Cringe. Do you know who William O. Douglas is?
No.
He was the bane of Wall Street back in FDR's day. That guy went after Wall Street, and you can look this up. FDR considered making him VP for what I believe was his 4th run. And Wall Street got so very upset. Do you know the planned coup against FDR? William O. Douglas was a big part of that because FDR was going after the people with the money. And Douglas was a very bullish enemy of the early oligarchical types. And I was talking to my grandfather on his deathbed. And the poor guy, he couldn't physically move. So he was stuck there listening to me talk about this book I was reading about the Cold War and about Alan Dulles.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, I don't know what's worse. The fact that this guy's withering away, dying from cancer, or the fact that he has to listen to me fucking talk the whole time.
That's something that he lived, you know?
Yeah. So I was talking to him in his final days, and he could barely really speak at this point. And I was telling him, Pop, you got to hear about this guy, William O. Douglas. He was an OG, man. He was going fucking crazy on Wall Street back in the day. And my grandpa, with what little power he had left, said, William O. Douglas swore me into the bar. And I was like, no fucking shit. That is crazy. And then my grandma ended up showing me a picture of it. But Douglas ended up becoming a Supreme Court judge. All this is to say, I would love it if we could resurrect him and pull him from the depths of the crypt. Yes, my grandpa, that too, but also William O. Douglas. And he would be a great president. That's my pick. Any Bulwark fans who are history buffs will know what I'm talking about.
Okay, this is a good transition into the show because, you know, I'm trying to learn from you all. This is
Everybody
why I'm doing this.
needs to learn about FDR era Supreme Court judges from Gen Z.
I was really hoping to kind of learn about like your mores and kind of how you communicate and why people are so excited about, you know, vigilante murders that are hot, and, you know, why like the bros have started to like Trump apparently so much. But I also, it sounds like I'm also going to get to learn some fun history facts. So that's good. We can do both.
Well, you know, the bros love Trump for reasons that I think we'll explore a lot on this show. And I think that as the show goes on and as we move forward, the bros are going to feel a lot more regret about Trump. There was some piece recently about how Gen Z's approval rating of Trump just tanked. And I think it might have been New York Times or something. It was like a lot of the Gen Zers who supported Trump are now starting to say, wait a second, he's doing that thing he said he would do. I didn't want that. And it's like, well, you know, a wolf in wolf's clothing might very well be a wolf.
Yeah.
So I think Trump's popularity with Gen Z might have peaked, because while I do think Gen Z men are becoming increasingly isolated and kind of mini fascist and terrible, Trump's presidency is notably making things worse. But I'm also a bit of an optimist.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The things that your optimistic view is that things are going to get really bad, and that Gen Z will revolt against Trump.
My optimistic view is that the night is always darkest before the dawn. As for when the dawn is coming is anybody's fucking guess.
John McCain loved that quote. I know you're a big John McCain man.
Listen, I was fucking 7 during that election.
Okay. Fuck you. Oh, fuck you. Okay. So we're going to be let's talk about the show. We're going to be talking to a lot of your friends. We're talking about some other people. I know a handful of Gen Z, so I might bring in a couple folks. But who, you know, what kinds of folks are we going to have on? You know, give people a little tease.
So we have a clear mission statement here at the FYPod, which is trying to figure out what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
And I think everybody can get behind that. So I am pulling
I
from.
really don't fucking know, if I'm just being honest. A big rationale for me of doing the show is that, like, my child is 7, so I know 7-year-olds and I know millennials, but I don't hang out with a lot of your people. You know, there's like a little bit of a cultural gap, and I feel a little bit blind by why, you know, the Nelk boys and Bussin' with the Boys are having such an impact on our culture. And so I'm kind of hoping that you and your pals can educate me on that a little bit.
Totally. And that's where we're pulling from all sorts of different people. Because like I said, one of the things that differentiates me from other young vocal Democrats is that I have friends. We're going to be talking to people.
Your humility is also, I think, really kind of sets you apart from your other.
Believe me, the humility is all there. But unfortunately, certain things you can't deny. So we're going to be talking to people from the sceney influencer type world, because that's obviously so interesting to people. I have frequented the TikTok houses and hung out with all the influencers, and
You've been in a hype house?
I've been in the hype house.
You've been in the hype house, like the original hype house?
Yes, and the Sway house. And it
who
is
else
really
is
interesting.
in the Sway house? Like, who are those? I've heard about these hype houses, but I don't really know.
One of them was the kid who had the Barstool show with Dave Portnoy,
Josh.
called BFFs. And Josh Richards. He's a very interesting type of twink. Then there was, I remember these guys' names, but their names are completely irrelevant. The point is, I was there during kind of the TikTok influencer generation. So we'll talk to some people who have some insight on that for some fucking reason. We're going to talk to some young people who actually do the work. Some young people who have been on the ground doing the real organizing. I was doing the TV activism. My activism regularly involved me having fucking hair and makeup. We're going to talk to the people putting their fucking boots on the ground.
Okay.
We're going to talk to regular Americans that the Democratic Party should maybe hear from a little bit more.
I like that.
And then we're going to talk to people who I think are entertaining enough that whether or not they have anything meaningful to say, it will certainly be a hoot.
I think we also, we haven't really decided this yet, but I think we don't really have, I cannot think of a MAGA person that I've had on my other Bulwark show because I just can't. All right. I just can't. I've argued with MAGA people on other shows, but I just don't want to sully, the purity of our TDS. But I kind of think on this show we should have a couple MAGA youth. What do you think?
I agree. I think that, a lot of people in the Democratic Party like to pretend that if we look away from something, it's going to go away. Yeah. And I think we just need to strike a balance between saying, okay, these people are here and they're here to stay, and nothing's going to change unless we, as I have stated earlier, figure out what the hell is going on. But also we can't turn into some sort of entertainment where we're just having some, cabinet of curiosities on and poking fun at freaks. There is a place for that.
Poking fun at freaks is fun.
It's totally fun. It's just not our truth because we're just both so smart. We need to be sharing our intelligence with everybody instead of bringing on idiots. But I'm sure there are some young MAGA people we can hear from. It's just a matter of figuring out who's going to come on and troll us and who's going to come on to own the libs and who's going to come on with the interest in engaging in some sort of conversation where we can gain some sort of better understanding of why young men are feeling this way. Because, it's been very unfortunate for me. I have seen a great number of young men fall for this con man, snake oil salesman, terrible, terrible fool, evil man. I've seen a lot of young people fall for him, and it really is so much due to the cultural wars that the Republicans are dramatically winning. And I wish it was a policy situation where I could say, yeah, but Kamala Harris wanted to give you like $20,000 for your first starter home. I wish that was the case. I wish I could say Trump has not lowered the price of eggs. But the price of eggs thing, that's not what's turning young men to the right. What's turning young men to the right is the fact that they are more isolated from each other than previous generations, and we are continuing to be more isolated. And also, there is a culture war being fought that encourages us when we are missing something in our lives, when our future doesn't look bright, when we're not getting laid the way we want to, when we don't have as many friends as we want. There's people out there successfully convincing us that we ought to figure out whose fault it is. It's never our fault. We should never take accountability. If we're 20 years old and we're vaping in bed and we're not brushing our teeth and we're leaving our room a fucking mess and women want to date older guys because we're fucking slobs, guys like Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson go in and say, no, don't worry about bettering yourself. Don't worry about meeting new people and gaining a better understanding of other human beings. It's their fault, not yours, and it's cultural Marxism.
Jordan Peterson did tell him to make their bed, to be fair.
Yeah, he did. And it was like a very obvious, sort of Trojan horse where it was like, let's give these young men one piece of advice that everybody can get behind. So you can come off as this rational conservative, right? What's wrong with making your bed? But inside that Trojan horse is this conservatism that goes so very radical that in Jordan Peterson's book, 12 Rules for Life, which did poison the brains of so many young men, he basically got into eugenics through talking about lobsters fighting each other. So we'll get into all of that. Yeah. We'll get into what I think young men can do to solve certain problems that they're blaming on woke. Like, hey, women don't want to sleep with you. Quick question for you. Do you have any female friends who are just your friends that you understand and see as a person? Maybe do that first.
Start there. Yeah, that's good advice. I like that you're going to try and bring out my better angels and saying that we should have guests that want to have real, honest conversations about this rather than just people for me to dunk on or you to dunk on, because we do like dunking. So I like that goal. I do wonder, the other thing I just was thinking about as you were chatting there, one of my truths is I think that one thing that went unmentioned on why some men are moving right in the culture war is that young liberals or young progressives are so annoying. And is it possible that like the meme where the guy like is slowly shaving his head and like putting on a Nazi tattoo, and the whole time he's saying, "You're making me do this"? Like, isn't there like just a little hint of truth to that?
Sure. Yeah. And it's also interesting because the young men you get on the far right are also dorks, right? Yeah. Like the incels, they aren't chads. The young men to the furthest right are the same type of dweebs as the young boys on the left who get X amount of attention. I think there's this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy in the Democratic Party where being cool and fun is not rewarded, whereas adhering to this strict decorum is rewarded. So if you follow these certain rules, if you're somebody who follows the rules, you're going to be rewarded and you're going to be platformed. And if you break the rules, you aren't. Meanwhile, the Republicans are dominating the culture by breaking the rules over and over again, because these young men who are so angry, they're saying, this is a world where the good guys don't win. So maybe if I get behind the bad guys, at least I'll fucking win. Yeah. And the Democrats have this, when they go low, we go high, which Michelle Obama said. And I think that that's a beautiful thing to apply to your interpersonal relationships and your business relationships. Yeah. But look at what going high has gotten us. When they go low, the Republicans, there's no more going low because there's no more precedent. Decorum is gone. Respect is gone. Republicans don't go low. They lowered the bar down to hell. And here we are sitting in purgatory, not meeting them where they're at and not engaging in a real fight. So we need to stop talking about going high. When they go low, we need to go even fucking lower and meet them in hell, because that's where they're dragging us. And if we don't meet them where they're at, they are totally fine staying down there and letting us fucking hold hands up in purgatory and talk about how sweet we're being and talk about how respectful we're being and not saying curse words.
We'll be saying curse words here. Okay. I love that. We're going to have so much time to talk about all that. So we'll leave that there. The show for people, FYPod, the For You Pod for the olds. It's like, it's your algorithm. It's the algorithm that of news that people are feeding you. We're basically going to have three. The show's going to evolve. Who the hell knows? But when we start, we're going to do three things. First segment's going to be this, me and Cam. We're going to vamp about the news, so you can get to hear what we think about what is happening that week. And then we're going to bring in this wide array of guests that he mentioned earlier. I'm hoping many of them will be vaping as the guest, but we'll see. That will just be serendipity if it happens, I guess. I'm not going to require it. And then at the end, we'll do some fun Gen Z news segments, and my fellow elder millennials will maybe get to learn some things about various characters who play a huge role in the lives of 24-year-olds that we've never heard of. So that's kind of going to be the show. Cam, did I miss anything? Is there something else that you want to talk about?
No, I think that we're going to have a lot of fun. As a 24-year-old, I can't say I'm too tapped into what makes 24-year-olds tick, but I am friends with everybody who does know. Okay. So that's part of why we have this.
You're not
segment.
tapped in just because of your eccentricities or your anxiety, or
anxiety's definitely a big one. No, I mean, I am tapped in the sense that all these young people who act the way that 24-year-olds act, I'm friends with all of them.
Yeah.
But like, I don't use TikTok. I fucking read. You know what I mean? So it's like there's such thing as what a concept. And I have ADHD, so reading is very much exposure therapy for me. But you know, I don't TikTok these influencers that I know. It's not because I've watched any of their dumb fucking content. It's because I was at the same parties as them back when I did drugs and was cool. Now I don't do drugs anymore, and I'm a fucking nerd. Okay. So, you know, we that's why we have this guest segment, and it's going to be a hoot because while I can provide some sort of insight, these are young people who actually do young people stuff while I'm reading.
All right, great. Reading and sobriety. It's kind of a sad mid-20s, but we'll get into that a little bit more.
Listen, I'm more fun. I am more fun than any mid-20s person you know if I did drugs and alcohol, which I don't. So I am just drugs and alcohol away from being the most fun 20-something you know.
Okay, well, great. People will be able to judge that for themselves. All right, Skim, so we go. Anything else? Is that it?
Listen, gang, lock the fuck in with us. We're going to go crazy. Not only are you going to get the best news and the best takes and the best guests, there's going to be some fun and most importantly, a little bit of love too. And you're going to listen to our show. You're going to be a little bit smarter and maybe you're going to look at this world with just a little bit more love. That's what Tim and I are all about. Fuck the news, fuck politics, fuck Gen Z. This is a show about love and hanging out with the boys.
It's all about love. Thanks, Cam. We'll see everybody soon.